Right guys, welcome to the Mason Verdi channel. In this video we'll be looking at how to buy my first property, and this is something that I'm looking at doing myself. So I've come up with a few questions to ask you, and hopefully you can guide me on what to do, and maybe some of you guys can relate to this too if you're looking to buy your first property. So let's just get straight into it then. So obviously buying my first property, I'll need a deposit, but how much deposit would I need?
But that totally depends on what kind of house you want to buy, what sort of income you have. But typically, any house from 40,000 upwards, you can get a mortgage on. So again, it depends. So if your income is a certain level, then you're looking at a certain level of sort of mortgage, and then that determines a lot. That plus your deposit determines what sort of house you can buy. So it just typically depends on your income. But whenever you're trying to get a mortgage, obviously the first thing they do is they'll look at giving you a mortgage in principle, which is practically looking at your income and your profile as a person, and then deciding, okay, we can lend Nima X amount of money, and then based on that you can determine what sort of house you can look at.
Yeah, okay, so in terms of like percentages then, on average, what would you say?
Yeah, so percentage wise, you can get it as low as 5%. I mean, market's a little bit sort of uncertain at the moment, so you probably need a minimum of 10-15, but on a normal day you can go as low as 5%. There are some schemes as well that boost your sort of deposit and stuff, which we'll get into a bit later in the video. But if you set the minimum to 5, but then if you want to get the better rates, the more deposit you put down, the lower the risk is for the lender, which means they're happy to lend you money at a lower rate. So let's say 5 to 20%.
5 to 20%. Okay. So as well as my deposit, do I need to account for or budget for any additional costs for when I'm buying the property?
The one certain one is the conveyancing fee. So your solicitor, basically, you need to pay for that. Depending on who your lender is, sometimes you have to pay for surveys and stuff. Some lenders have that covered, but some lenders ask you to sort of pay for valuations and surveys and stuff. So
okay.
Typically, I mean, all together added up, again, depending on who your solicitor is and who your surveyor is and stuff, anywhere between £700-800 to £2,000.
Okay, so I've now got my deposit ready, and I've got a budget for the additional costs, up to £2,000. What's the next step? How do I then go out and get a mortgage? Obviously there are various ways. What would you say the best way is? How do I get a mortgage? Would it be better going through a bank or going through a broker?
I would say, I mean, banks at the moment have this service that you can literally pop in, and in about, just get a quick appointment, and in like 10-15 minutes, without doing a hard search on your credit file, they can tell you typically what level of mortgage they can get you. But if you can find a good broker, I always recommend going through a broker, because they sort of know how to present your information better to the bank, and they typically would know what you require as well, because they're in constant contact with all the lenders. Plus the fact that if you go into a bank, that is just one lender, whereas the broker has access to tens or hundreds of other lenders as well. So I'd say going through a broker is probably a better option. Yeah.
But would there usually be an additional cost going through a broker, or?
Yeah, there will be. But obviously that doesn't, 99% of the time, that fee comes out of the lender's side, so you wouldn't pay anything. But sometimes, obviously, they might charge you a fee and stuff. But most of the time, it's paid for by the lender.
Okay, so as a buyer, I won't be paying the broker, and they'd be getting their money through the lender most of the time, usually.
Usually, yeah.
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 Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of the actual mortgage itself, how do I increase my mortgageability, or if you like, how do I get the most money?
Okay. So there's a few things that the lenders would look at. Obviously, first and foremost is your income. But then, say for example, two people who have the same amount of income, and one spends half of the money that the other one spends. Obviously, that one will be able to get more mortgage. They also look at your credit file, so any missed payments, anything like that. The good way of sort of increasing your mortgage or lending amount is to go and look at your credit profile, and on the usual sites like Experian, or there are a few others that you can look at as well. They'll usually guide you on what to do to increase your credit. Things like if you registered to vote, whether you have credit cards, whether you've been working with your credit, stuff like this will increase you, obviously.
Also, registering for voting actually increases your credit score.
Yeah.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Just learn something new every
So
day.
it just tells them. It's all about making it safe for the lenders to lend. So if they know that you're registered at this address and you're voting at this address, and your utilities and stuff is registered to that address, then that tells them that you're someone that they can easily find. Whereas if someone's not registered anywhere, then they're going to be hard to track. So it's just about reducing the risk for the lender.
Yeah.
So you got that. You got, obviously, if you've had credit cards that you've had and you've used and paid on time, that tells them that you are a responsible person. You can borrow and pay back. Things like this, obviously, it'll better your sort of credit score. And then obviously on the income side, like I said, they look at your income. Say for example, you have £3,000 per month coming in. If you're spending £2,000 a month on dinners out, or anything, gambling, whatever, then that increases your risk.
Yeah.
Because then the lender can't predict whether you're gonna sort of keep your money or you're gonna spend it. Whereas if you've got an income of set amount, and then you've got set outgoings,
Yeah.
and the majority of the money that's left is getting saved, then they'll be like, okay, so this guy is trustworthy, he doesn't spend his money there or thereabouts, so they'll lend you more money.
So essentially, you're saying, leading up to like buying your first property, essentially bite the bullet for a bit, and for a period of time, maybe reduce your spendings a little bit, save a bit more, so you increase your likelihood of getting a mortgage and increasing the amount that you can potentially borrow.
Which is typically what you would do naturally anyway, because if you're earning 3,000 and you're spending 3,000, then you haven't got the deposit to pay for the house anyway. So when you try and sort of save up for the house, automatically you sort of change your lifestyle a bit.
Yeah.
And obviously that is then seen by the lender as someone who's responsible.
Yeah. So, okay, in terms of actually getting a mortgage and like related to the person, in this case myself, at what point do I take out a mortgage? Do I take out a mortgage as soon as I can, in terms of age-wise and the stage I'm at in life, or do I wait a bit longer? Maybe in terms of in terms of some jobs, in some cases, do I wait for like a couple of promotions and then go for a mortgage, or do I get it as soon as I can and max it out as soon as I can?
To be honest, I would recommend buying as soon as you can. Reason being is, so say for example, okay, so you can get £100,000 mortgage. The house that you really want is 200,000, and you want to wait for 2 promotions. Now, by buying a house for 100,000, you're not losing anything. Real estate or properties, obviously, there's limited amount of land in any country, and typically, there's always a growth in property. If you be a little bit clever, and the first property that you want to buy, make sure it's a little bit below market value.
Yeah.
And then obviously you add the sort of capital growth that you have in that time by the time you get your promotions. When you do get your promotions eventually, you've got a house which will have a lot of equity in, which you can either sell, or if you wanted, you can rent that, and there's something called a rent to buy, which means you're renting your own residential. You get a consent to let from your lender, and then you buy your next house, which means now you have two properties rather than one. Or if you wanted to sell it, like I said, you've made a bit of money on it, and obviously you haven't paid rent, which is another sort of expense that you've saved.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but in terms of getting the most money or help in terms of your mortgage, are there any schemes that I can potentially look at for buying my property?
There are things like help to buy, shared ownership. There's a lot of different schemes that will help you buy, but you just got to look at it objectively, because, you know, say for example, in area X, houses are typically around about 100,000 mark, and there's a new build scheme going with, you know, help to buy, and they, you know, you can buy that with 5% down payment, and obviously I think you get 20% from the government, interest free for 5 years or something. But you got to look at the prices there and see if it's worth. Sometimes you might end up paying 10% and buying a property which is a little bit below market value and make a lot more money on it, rather than, you know, just paying 5%, but then, you know, paying more on the property price, if you like.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just, in every case, you've got to look at that as an option and consider all the other options as well, and see which one gives you the most opportunity to, you know, gain a bit more money in your property in the coming years.
Okay, so up to this point, I've now got my deposit sorted, and I've got my budget sorted for any additional costs. I've got a mortgage in principle from the bank or a broker. Now, in terms of the actual property itself, what houses should I be looking at? Should I be looking at something for the short term where I can stay in it for maybe a couple of years, a few years, and then look on moving out of it and selling it or renting it out? Or am I looking more longer term where I want to be staying in it for a lot longer? What would you say the type of property should be?
Well, typically, I mean, your first house in most cases is not going to be, you know, your forever home.
Your ultimate house that you want to live in, yeah.
Only because obviously when you're young, your level of income and stuff is not, well, I mean, it could be. It just depends what you need and what you want from your house, really. But in most cases, the first property that you buy, you know, throughout your life, you probably change it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, but the sooner you get on the ladder, the easier it becomes, because without you even knowing, obviously you're building equity in your house by paying your mortgage, and also you got the capital gains. And the good thing about obviously residential properties is the capital gains is on your residential isn't, you know, subject to tax.
Yeah.
We've done a video on it on residential property that you can sort of, we'll probably link it down.
Yeah, we'll link it somewhere on the screen, like you usually say.
Yeah, and you can check that out. But the good thing about it is obviously, you know, you're living your life instead of paying rent. You're in your own home.
Yeah.
And in a few years, you've made a bit of money from it as well.
Yeah. Okay. So another question that I've seen pop up a lot, and a lot of people are probably wondering about, is, okay, we've talked about having a set income from, for example, a job that you can potentially get promoted in. But what if you're like self-employed or you work for yourself? does that affect your mortgageability that we talked about before, or does it affect how hard it is to actually get a mortgage or not? I don't know.
Yeah, the short answer is yeah, but there's a little bit more to it. Obviously, if you're self-employed, again, it goes back to risk for the lender.
Yeah.
So they couldn't predict whether your business is going to be still there in a year time or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is why if you're employed, they probably look at your 3 or 6 last sort of pay slips.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you're self-employed, they look at your 2 years prior sort of SA302s, which is basically the amount of tax you've paid based on your income for the last 2 years. And based on that, they can typically tell you, how much they can pay you. Now, if you're a company director, again with that, they need to look at what sort of income you're getting from your company.
Yeah.
Plus your SA302. So just so that people, say for example your company's making 20,000 a year and you pay yourself 20,000 a year.
Yeah.
Then, you're not. It's not a very stable sort of company.
Yeah.
So they look at the company accounts, your accounts, and how much you're paying yourself through the company. But if you're just self-employed, then they just look at your last 2 years' accounts.
So essentially, if you're self-employed or you own a company, it's going to be a lot harder.
It is. It's got.
Because there are more checks.
The issue is a lot of people, they try and sort of save money here and there, on taxes and stuff, which obviously that in turn affects your mortgageability, how much you can borrow. And when you're buying a property, because it's a big expense, you need to rely on your sort of, you're not buying a car, it's a little bit more money, so you need to rely on how much you can borrow. And the more you can borrow, the better chance you've got at sort of making money through that property as well.
So yeah, there you go, guys. There were a few questions that I had and I seen popping about buying your first property. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give us a like, and if you've got any questions, comment it down below. And for more videos like this, just subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.